talking 1985's Radioactive Dreams. This one is directed by Albert Pion, of course done other kind of post-apocalyptic movies, including Cyborg. And this one stars Michael Dudikoff, obviously most known for the American Ninja films, Platoon Leader, stuff like that. And you've also got John Stockwell. You also have a couple of roles from George Kennedy and Don Murray. Now, the story here focuses on Phillip and Marlowe. Yes, this is not being very subtle in regards to some of its kind of ideas here. Yeah, so Phillip and Marlowe, who are a couple of boys who get put in this kind of like bunker at the start of a kind of a nuclear war, and manage to kind of escape, I think 15 years later, into a kind of like post-apocalyptic society. And they have been reading lots of kind of like pulp fiction, Hardy Boys novels, things like this, and have kind of modelled themselves on kind of 40 style Private Eye. And there's a running joke here how they keep referring to themselves as dicks, as in private investigators and things like this. And they're out in this world now, not really knowing much about it, and run into various kind of denizens. It kind of is a lot like the Fallout games. Obviously, this came out way before then. But it does have, if you play the Fallout games, if you know what I'm talking about, you know, it has a kind of a semblance to that. So you can class this as a post-apocalyptic movie in the line of Mad Max, but it doesn't really, you're not really kind of getting into bikie gangs and things like this. There is a few kind of like mutants that have affected by radiation and things like this, but it's kind of more of a weird sort of cityscape where there's still quite a lot of people around, and you know, we have various kind of misadventures. And the whole plot of this film is that Phillip and Marlowe have got these keys to the last kind of active nuclear missile, and whoever controls the missile ultimately, it controls the kind of the world at this point. So we have various kind of factions that are all kind of gunning for these two, and you know, femme fatales, you've got double crosses, all this kind of stuff in there. So it mixes kind of elements of kind of classic kind of noir, pulp fiction kind of style stories, with obviously a post-apocalyptic setting. Anyway, so let's talk about what I think works in this movie. As a kind of a concept, I do feel this movie is quite unique. I had this on VHS when it came out, and this is a film that I really enjoyed back in the kind of the 80s when it was kind of released. And, you know, it has to be said that it's a different take on the post-apocalyptic Mad Max kind of style films, and there were a lot of them in the kind of the 80s. You know, if you're not from around those decades, trust me, there's a hell of a lot of straight to kind of video, you know, post-apocalyptic movies. This one, I have to give it props for kind of, you know, doing something a little bit different. I quite like that we have two characters that are very different in regards to our kind of our male lead. So the character that John Stockwell plays, I guess, is our main character. He's a lot more subdued, a lot more kind of sensible, and the kind of the quieter one of the duo, whilst Michael Dudikoff character is the kind of like the more crazy, outrageous one, who's a lot more kind of outgoing, but maybe not quite as smart and things like that. But they still kind of, you know, you still get the impression that even though these guys are quite different, you can still understand how they'd be kind of friends, and I quite like their kind of relationship with each other. There's also some quite imaginative makeup effects and things like this. I would imagine some of this stuff is recycled from other films, to be honest. Without kind of looking at it, you can just, you know, think, you know, maybe some of this stuff kind of looks a little bit familiar. But nonetheless, there's quite a good variety of antagonists that our two intrepid heroes kind of go against here. From, you know, mutants to red-headed biker women to giant rats to, you know, Scarface-inspired kids. There's the whole lot kind of going on in regards to a variety of weird and wonderful kind of antagonists that live in this post-Nuke age and stuff like that. It's very, very 80s. Even though this movie is meant to take place, I think it's meant to be 2001, around that sort of time is when it's meant to take place. It really, really is a product of the 80s, and complete with kind of cheesy kind of 80s tunes and things like that. So if you kind of want a nostalgia flashback, then check it out. What doesn't work for me, I think, to be honest with you, this movie suffers from a severe lack of characterization from pretty much anyone. And to be fair, this is true of some of the movies that have come from Alpine I have found in the past. It just kind of like goes straight into a story without really ever building up much kind of character here. And as such, you're not as invested in the characters as they kind of are going through the movie. And I've got to say that the plot is, despite there being a couple of kind of double crosses, we don't really feel like we go on a particularly big journey with these guys. They kind of go to a city and are just trying to avoid various kind of people. That's kind of it, really. So I don't know if you really feel like you're kind of going on a real adventure with these two. It seems like it's kind of like an extended first act of a film rather than kind of a movie in its own right. Because it just seems to be a lot of the same kind of thing, you know. They'll run into one group of people, they'll try and kill them. There'll be another group of people, they'll try and kill them. And it's kind of all in the kind of the same locale, but the different antagonists will have a different motif and things like that. It gets a little bit kind of, you know, repetitive after a while, I have to say. The movie, I don't think, is also particularly well shot. The cinematography here is quite poor, and I do appreciate this obviously is an 80s movie, and a lot of that can be down to kind of, you know, transfer and things like this. But nonetheless, there's some quite awkward edits here. Some of the kind of the framing on anything is particularly good, and there is sometimes a problem with the lighting and stuff like that. So I don't know if it's a particularly well shot movie. Other than that, I would say the Michael Dudikoff character, his constant kind of like hijinks, shall we call it, gets a little bit grating. John Stockwell's character, I think, is a lot more likeable, but Dudikoff, I think, is just miscast here. Obviously, he's primarily known for his action roles, as I've mentioned, American Ninja, Platoon Leader, stuff like that. Here, you know, he's just doing song and dance routine over the kind of the whole time, and to me, his character isn't particularly likeable, and he just seems miscast, to be honest. It doesn't really seem like you're getting him the best character from casting Dudikoff, unfortunately. And there's just kind of a smattering of the characters who we don't really kind of see much of, to be honest. So it's ultimately an oddity, this one. It's a little bit of a, you know, I'll give it props for being original or having some type of original ideas in a kind of a somewhat kind of tried and tested genre. But having rewatched it for the review, and I remember quite liking this one when it was on VHS, but I've got to be honest with you, watching it now, I actually found it quite dull, and the characters not particularly engaging, and that's kind of a little bit of a 1-2 punch to kind of make this film a below average film, in my opinion. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.